Another story that is a story I like to tell quite a bit illustrates how we should address change as it occurs. I grew up in southeastern Ohio, a little place called Monroe County. And I know there's at least one person knows where Monroe County is, but the rest of you don't. I grew up on a 60-acre farm in Monroe County. And on this farm, we always had at least one pig. Now, the pig I remember the most was Snowball. Now, Snowball was a 350-pound white Yorkshire. And she was quite a pet. You scratch Snowball on the belly, and she'd try to help you a little bit, and then she'd roll over on her back, give you complete access to scratch as long as you would. And Snowball was a very prolific animal, too. She would have 16 to 18 pigs per litter. Yeah. That was a little bit of a problem, as my dad used to say, because Snowball only had 13 place settings. Yeah, it's a problem. I ended up with me bottle feeding about 4 or 5 of those pigs every litter. Well, there was a semi-annual event on this farm. And that was, we'd load up Snowball, take her over to the neighbor's farm for a social visit. And just like clockwork, we'd have that huge litter of pigs. One summer day, my dad found my older brother Joe and me in the barnyard playing, and he came up to us, "Boys, time to take Snowball over the Howaller farm. I got the truck in the pig pen, and I want you old boys to go on down there and load up Snowball. I'll be down in just a few minutes." Now, my dad was a high school principal, and in those days, a professional paddler. He paddled kids for a living. So when Dad told us to do something, we tend to do it. So Joe and I beat feet down the pig pen, and just like Dad said, there was a truck in the pig pen, and up against the wire mesh fence was a metal ramp. Well, I grabbed one corner of that ramp, and Joe grabbed the other corner, and we drug it over and affixed it to the back of the truck. And we took a couple of steps away just to give Snowball a little bit of room. And Snowball, being the curious animal she was, she walked about halfway up the ramp, looked in the truck, saw nothing of interest, and just stood right there. And we had gained half the territory we needed, and we were afraid we were going to lose it all. So I looked over at Joe, and Joe looked over at me, and without a word, I put his shoulder up against the hind quarter of Snowball. And Joe put his shoulder up the other hind quarter of Snowball, and we commenced to push that pig into the truck. I mean, we intended, that's what I should have said, we intended to push that pig into a truck. What do you think happened differently than our plan? What do you think Snowball did differently than our plan? Yeah, well, she stopped first, then she felt the pressure, and she backed against the pressure. And when she backed against that pressure, it threw me in a mud puddle on one side of the ramp and Joe in a mud puddle on the other side of the ramp. If you've ever been in a pig mud puddle, it is not the nicest place I've ever been. I can remember I'm teetering on the edge of that ramp, anticipating my pre-puddle plunge, when Dad came around the corner of the barn. He thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Dad, as a rule, was not a laughing man. Well, he's doubled over in laughter, and Joe and I were trying to get off as much of that pig mud puddle as we could. And finally, Dad's laughter subsided. He looked at us and said, "Boys, I taught you how to load a pig. That's not the way to do it." What do you think Dad's plan was? He went over to the granary, got a little metal cup of shelled corn, made a little Hansel and Gretel trail up the ramp, threw the rest in the front of the truck. 3 minutes, Snowball was loaded and proud to be there. You know, a number of years later, I was working with a client that had a particularly difficult change issue that they needed my help with. And in thinking about that, I realized, you know what? In at least this one characteristic, I am not that different than Snowball. In my life, when people try to force me to do something, and I don't know why it's good for me, I don't know why it's good for the organization, or I don't know how to do it, I tend to resist. And I think that's what a lot of us do. We tend to resist when we don't have the knowledge. So what I tell leaders is, if you are going to create change, You have to make sure people are clear about what the behaviors are that will create a success for the employees and for the organization. You've got to have dialogue with people to make sure they understand that this is why the organization is doing it, and this is why you should be doing it, why it will help you individually. We've got to create opportunities for people to learn. We've got to give feedback about how well they perform the behaviors, and we have to have reward systems that drive the behaviors of the future. Because remember, you can't push a pig into a truck. Thank you very much.